Conflict. Conflict is all around us. In the plant world, in the animal world, birds, fish, microorganisms. It is everywhere. We have conflict between humans, and we have the internal conflict within us, in our hearts, in our minds, all within, all around, all the time. No rest from the fight. But there is one conflict we cannot do anything about. None of us. Except for one. Only one. Hebrews 2:14. Since the children have flesh and blood, he, that is Christ, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil. Here we are given the specific purpose of Christ's mission, his incarnation, his birth, his life and death. He came to destroy the devil. Somehow, through his own death, Christ has destroyed him who holds the power of death. The last video focused on the idea of power. And here again, another type of power that Satan has is mentioned, the power of death. The key thing here is that Christ shared in our flesh and blood. In other words, he could also be affected by death. God could have come at any time into this world in the fullness of his glory, as he is, to destroy Satan with a click of his fingers. But again, this is not how God functions. This is not in his nature. Instead, God became one of us, and he functioned as one of us, as a human being. And here is the mystery, the greatest mystery of all. Whatever Christ has done for us, he has done it as a human being. But at the same time, he never ceased being God. Otherwise, Satan would not tempt him to use his divine power to change stones into bread or to come down from the cross. Satan will not tempt you and me to do this because we don't have this power. And even if he wanted to, we could not do this. And the Christians, for the first 7-8 centuries, tried to figure out this glorious mystery. They had brains like you and me, smart people, and they did not have distractions like TV and social media, all of this stuff to take their time. They had all the time in the world to study the scriptures, to study Christ. And each passing century, they kept updating their understanding and their statement of belief, their creed. And it was all about who Christ was, in terms of understanding how someone can be both human and God at the same time. Wow. No one can understand this. It doesn't make any sense. All logic fails here, and our rational thinking process and all reasoning eventually comes to its limits. And we cannot grasp it because what we observe and try to explain is light years away. Light years away. In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, this is what Christ said. Therefore, my Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. And here again we have the idea of power. While the devil holds the power of death, Christ holds the power of life. There's a clear contrast here. All the people who were dead and were brought back to life, they had all been resurrected back to life by Christ or by his apostles. But Christ said, when I die, I have the power to take my life up again, myself. No one is going to raise me back to life. I will rise back to life myself, on my own, from the power of life that is within me. God decided to deal with the human predicament, not by killing, but by dying. And this tells us a lot about who he is, what he is like, his character, his nature. Christianity in the first 7-8 centuries, many centuries really, tried to explain Christ in terms of his essence. And with a little help from Greek philosophy, they try to rationally grasp this mystery that transcends the human, rational, logical thinking process. But what we can see in Christ is God's true nature, the expression of his inner being, his personal characteristics, his relational qualities. So, God, through Christ, decided to deal with the terrestrial human problem, predicament, not by killing the devil, but by allowing the devil to kill him. And initially it may have appeared that the devil was victorious, but the nail that the devil drove through Christ's heel sprung back with great force and launched back into the devil's head. And in a manner of speaking, it crushed his head. What happened in the person of Christ, who was both God and man, at the time when he breathed his last breath on the cross? No one knows but Jesus himself. Somehow, he managed to absorb the entire human predicament into himself. All the evil of this world, sin, suffering, and death. And it all imploded within him, in his heart, so to say. He was more powerful than the sum of it all, and he could handle it all. So it did not explode out of him, but it imploded. And with his power of life and light, he swallowed all darkness and death, and he destroyed it. He destroyed it in him. He was victorious over it, and he triumphed over the devil and the powers and authorities of the spiritual realm. It was like he swallowed a nuclear bomb, which then detonated into all kinds of chain reactions, but he managed to come out at the other end. He is one of a kind, a unique being in the entire visible and invisible universe, who was able to bring humanity and God back together in his person, in his body. The only one who had the power over sin and over the devil and over death. While Christ was alive, the devil at least had the power to tempt Christ, provoke Christ. But after the cross, it's game over. And when Christ rose back to life, there was no more nonsense from Satan, no more temptations, no more harassment, no more oppression, no more persecution. For Satan, there was only one thing left, a clear, sharp realization of his inevitable and impending doom. So, what is the devil to do now when he cannot touch Christ anymore? His arch enemy, his arch opponent. Well, the devil prowls around in fierce anger, looking for prey indiscriminately, because each one of us is a potential candidate who can become loyal to Christ, and so remind the devil again and again and again of his defeat. Revelation chapter 12, 10 to 12. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb." By the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. The accuser has been cast down, and the power to accuse has been taken away from him. This activity he's been engaged in day and night for thousands of years. Now it came to a sudden stop, once for all. That is good news for us, but also it is a bad news, because now all the spare time and energy he's been left with that is not used for accusations and litigations anymore, Satan will use to oppress and persecute. That is, until the second coming of Christ. After that, he will be left with only one power to deceive, which he will be able to exercise only briefly just before the third coming of Christ. The time we live in right now is the time of tension between the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ. It is the time of woe for us who live on earth. But this era will eventually come to its inevitable end, whenever Christ in his wisdom decides to end it. And at the very center of this passage, you can see right now, and at the very center of this message is the key phrase, the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb, referring to the cross of Christ. And it is also at the very center of the book of Revelation, if you look at where this chapter is, where this text is. And it is also at the center of the entire Bible narrative, and at the very center of the war between good and evil, if you remember the key image you saw in the first video in this series. So I will bring this series to a close with the same image I opened it, and you can see it right now. Maybe just add another little detail to it. It just seems the right thing to do, to bring this message into focus, to place it at the very center of everything, and to observe the light of life that is emanating from the cross, or rather from the person who was crucified upon it. And If you have benefited from these videos, or have been blessed, or enlightened, share the link to these videos with someone you know and pass it on.